Hello and welcome to my CBSE English virtual class. Today we shall be doing a lesson from your Class 11's Hornbill textbook. We are not afraid to die if we can all be together. This story has been wonderfully written by Gordon Cook and Alan East. I have dealt with this chapter in two videos. So this is part 1 of We Are Not Afraid to Die If We Can All Be Together. Gordon Cook was born on the 3rd of December 1978 in Toronto. He is a two-time Canadian Olympic sailor. He sails for the Royal Canadian Yacht Club. He is the son of Stephen Cook and Linda Cook. He has a great interest in writing stories too. Alan East was a legal trainer and a litigator. He later joined Coventry University as a senior lecturer in law. Let us have a brief look into the story before we go into its details. In the year 1976, one of the narrators went on a round-the-world voyage to duplicate the voyage of Captain James Cook 200 years earlier. The first part of the voyage was smooth and enjoyable. They had taken two sailors to help in navigation across stormy seas. On encountering bad weather, a giant wave smashed their boat, Wave Walker, and caused severe damage. The narrator and his family suffered injuries too. With great difficulty, they managed to save the boat from wreckage. In spite of all odds, the family and the crew remained cheerful. The narrator decided to reach an island named Ill Amsterdam, about 165 kilometers away. Though it was an almost impossible task, good seamanship brought them success. Now, with the help of line-by-line textual explanation, let us understand the story in detail. Children, kindly open to page 13 of your Hornbill textbook. The name of the lesson, once again, We Are Not Afraid to Die If We Can All Be Together. In July 1976, my wife Mary, son Jonathan, 6, and daughter Suzanne, 7, and I set sail from Plymouth, England, to duplicate the round-the-world voyage made 200 years earlier by Captain James Cook. For the longest time, Mary and I, a 37-year-old businessman, had dreamt of sailing in the wake of the famous explorer, and for the past 16 years, we had spent all our leisure time honing our seafaring skills in British waters. Our boat Wave Walker, a 23-meter, 30-ton wooden-hulled beauty, had been professionally built, and we had spent months fitting it out and testing it in the roughest weather we could find. The first leg of our planned 3-year, 105,000-kilometer journey passed pleasantly as we sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. There, before heading east, we took on two crewmen, American Larry Vigil and Swiss Herb Sigler, to help us tackle one of the world's roughest seas, the Southern Indian Ocean. On our second day out of Cape Town, we began to encounter strong gales. For the next few weeks, they blew continuously. Gales did not worry me, but the size of the waves was alarming, up to 15 meters, as high as our main mast. December 25th found us 3,500 kilometers east of Cape Town. Despite atrocious weather, we had a wonderful holiday completed with a Christmas tree. Next year's day saw no improvement in the weather, but we reasoned that it had to change soon. And it did change, for the worse. At dawn on January 2nd, the waves were gigantic. We were sailing with only a small storm jib and were still making 8 knots. As the ship rose to the top of each wave, we could see endless, enormous seas rolling towards us, and the screaming of the wind and spray was painful to the ears. To slow the boat down, we dropped the storm jib and lashed a heavy mooring rope in a loop across the stern. Then we double-lashed everything, went through our life raft drill, attached lifelines, donned oilskins and life jackets. and waited. So, children, the narrator tells us, Gordon Cook, he and his family, in the year 1976, in the month of July, he has given the details of his family, his wife Mary, his 6-year-old son Jonathan, and his 7-year-old daughter Suzanne. They had set sail from Plymouth, England. And what was their intention? They wanted to go on a round the world voyage which Captain James Cook had undergone 200 years earlier. So, for a long time, the narrator, Gordon Cook, and his wife Mary had dreamt of sailing just like Captain James Cook. So, for 16 years, they had spent all their free time only honing their seafaring skills. Honing means practicing and improving and getting the best out of their skills. So, they practiced seafaring for the last 16 years. And then they also made a boat of their own. The name of their boat was Wave Walker. It was a 23-meter, 30-ton wooden hulled boat. They had spent many months fitting it, and then they even tested it in the roughest weather they could find to see if it was tough enough to go on a voyage on this boat. So they started from Plymouth, England. The first leg of their journey, of their voyage, it was a 3-year voyage to travel round the world. The first leg was from Plymouth, England to Cape Town in Africa. So this 105,000 kilometer journey was very pleasant for them. They sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. At Cape Town, they hired 2 more sailors, 2 crewmen, an American man named Larry Vigil and a Swiss sailor named Herb Siegler. They hired these 2 crewmen because now they would be entering into the dangerous southern Indian Ocean. The waters are very rough there, so they would need assistance and help. On the second day out of Cape Town, so when they left Cape Town, on the second day, they started facing very strong winds. Gales means winds. For the first few weeks, they were blowing continuously. But the strong winds was not a point of worry for the narrator Gordon Cook. But the size of the waves was really alarming because the waves were rising as high as 15 meters. It was December 25th when they were 3,500 kilometers east of Cape Town after leaving Cape Town. The weather was really bad. Atrocious weather means very bad weather. But they enjoyed their Christmas. They had a Christmas tree with them. They had a wonderful Christmas. After Christmas, New Year had also come, but the weather saw no improvement at all. But now they felt that the weather will soon change. And yes, it did change. But it did not change for the better. It changed for the worse. On the 2nd of January, the waves were again gigantic. So they were sailing with only a very small storm jib. Jib means a very small sail which is used in stormy weather. It was very small, and they were still traveling at a speed of 8 knots. Knot, K-N-O-T, knot means 1 nautical mile. 1 nautical mile is 1.852 kilometers per hour. So 1.852 kilometers per hour into 8, that was the speed of their ship, of their boat. So they slowed the boat down, they dropped the storm jib, and then they lashed a heavy rope across the stern to protect their boat from getting damaged. Then they made all arrangements for their own safety. The raft was ready, they attached lifelines to themselves, they wore oilskins and life jackets, and they were waiting for the worst to come. If in the worst condition they had to jump out of the boat, That is why they wore all their lifelines, their oilskins and life jackets, and were ready to face any kind of disaster. Let's continue reading. The first indication of impending disaster came at about 6 p.m. with an ominous silence. The wind dropped and the sky immediately grew dark. Then came a growing roar and an enormous cloud towered aft of the ship. With horror, I realized that it was not a cloud, but a wave like no other I had ever seen. It appeared perfectly vertical and almost twice the height of the other waves, with a frightful breaking crest. The roar increased to a thunder as the stern moved up the face of the wave, and for a moment I thought we might ride over it. But then a tremendous explosion shook the deck. A torrent of green and white water broke over the ship. My head smashed into the wheel, and I was aware of flying overboard and sinking below the waves. I accepted my approaching death, and as I was losing consciousness, I felt quite peaceful. Unexpectedly, my head popped out of the water. A few meters away, Wave Walker was near capsizing, her masts almost horizontal. Then a wave hurled her upright. My lifeline jerked taut. I grabbed the guardrails and sailed through the air into the Wave Walker's main boom. Subsequent waves tossed me around the deck like a rag doll. My left ribs cracked, my mouth filled with blood and broken teeth. Somehow I found the wheel, lined up the stern for the next wave, and hung on. Water, water everywhere. I could feel that the ship had water below, but I dared not abandon the wheel to investigate. Suddenly, the front hatch was thrown open, and Mary appeared. "We are sinking," she screamed. "The decks are smashed. We are full of water." "Take the wheel," I shouted as I scrambled for the hatch. So, at dawn on the 2nd of January, they found that the waves were growing gigantic. That is why they slowed down their boat and they were ready with their raft and lifelines, oilskins, jackets, etc. So by the time it was 6 p.m. in the evening on the 2nd of January, suddenly the wind dropped. The wind stopped and there was a strange kind of a silence. Ominous means strange, and eerie silence. The wind dropped and the sky grew extremely dark. Then, with a growing roar, they found a huge cloud above their ship. But they were horrified later on to realize that it was actually not a cloud. It was a huge black wave almost on top of their ship. It appeared perfectly vertical and almost twice the height of other waves. So the waves were more than 15 meters high, and this particular wave was double that height. Then the roar increased to a thunder. Then there was a thundering sound, and as the stern moved up the face of the wave. Stern means the back part of the ship. The behind of the ship is called the stern. And for a moment, he thought that he might ride over it. He thought that he may be able to overcome this huge wave. But then there was a tremendous explosion. And what happened? A torrent of green and white water broke over the ship. That means what? The wave had crashed on the ship, and the ship was entirely in water. The green waters of the sea was on the ship. And the man, Gordon Cook, he was thrown out of the ship. His head smashed into the wheel, and then he flew overboard and he was sinking below the waves. So he was in such a disastrous condition that he accepted his death. He thought that he is going to die. So when he accepted his approaching death, he felt quite peaceful because he thought that there was no way to save his life. So it is better to accept the death. But something unexpected happened, and his head suddenly popped out of the water. And then he found that his ship Wave Walker was a few meters away from him. The masts were almost capsizing. Capsizing means sinking. But then something miraculous happened. Another wave hurled against the ship and made it upright again. So, once again, then the narrator found the urge to survive. First, he was accepting his approaching death, but now he once again grew the urge to survive when he saw that another wave brought the ship back to its original position. So he grabbed the rails and he sailed through the air because he was wearing his lifeline jacket, and then he managed to reach his ship. Once he reached the deck of his ship, Wave Walker, the waves were tossing him just like a doll made out of rag. How it is tossed in water, he was being tossed like a rag doll. And what happened? His ribs cracked, his mouth was filled with blood because of his broken teeth, so he was badly injured. But then somehow he managed to find the wheel of the ship. He managed to bring the ship under control. But then, to his dismay, he saw that there was water everywhere in the ship. But still, he thought that it would not be wise for him to leave the wheel, because he could manage the ship if he was at the wheel. When he was at the wheel, at that time his wife Mary opened the latch and said, "We are sinking." She was warning him, "We are sinking, the decks are smashed, and we are full of water." Then the narrator handed over the wheel of the ship to Mary, and he came out into the deck. Hatch is the opening in the deck of a ship. He came out to the deck and he was thinking he had to find out ways on how he could save the ship from being drowned in the waters. Okay, let's continue reading. Larry and Herb were pumping like madmen. Broken timbers hung at crazy angles. The whole starboard side bulged inwards. Clothes, crockery, charts, tins, and toys sloshed about in deep water. I half swam, half crawled into the children's cabin. "Are you all right?" I asked. "Yes," they answered from an upper bunk. "But my head hurts a bit," said Sue, pointing to a big bump above her eyes. I had no time to worry about bumped heads. After finding a hammer, screws, and canvas, I struggled back on deck. With the starboard side bashed open, we were taking water with each wave that broke over us. If I couldn't make some repairs, we would surely sink. Somehow I managed to stretch canvas and secure waterproof hatch covers across the gaping holes. Some water continued to stream below, but most of it was now being deflected over the side. More problems arose when our hand pumps started to block up with the debris floating around the cabins, and the electric pump short circuited. The water level rose threateningly. Back on deck, I found that our two spare hand pumps had been wrenched overboard, along with the forestay sail, the jib, the dinghies, and the main anchor. Then I remembered we had another electric pump under the chart room floor. I connected it to an outpipe and was thankful to find that it worked. The night dragged on with an endless, bitterly cold routine of pumping, steering, and working the radio. We were getting no replies to our mayday calls, which was not surprising in this remote corner of the world. Sue's head had swollen alarmingly. She had two enormous black eyes, and now she showed us a deep cut on her arm. When I asked why she hadn't made more of her injuries before this, she said, "I didn't want to worry you when you were trying to save us all." So in the meantime, Larry and Herb, they started pumping the water out of the ship like madmen. All over there were broken timbers, the wood. It was a wooden boat, so there were broken bits of wood all over, hanging at different angles and postures. The whole starboard side of the ship was damaged. Starboard is the right side of the ship. The left side of the ship is called the port, the right side is called the starboard, and the back is called the stern. So the right side of the ship started getting damaged and water was pouring in through the starboard side. All their clothes, their crockery, their charts, their toys, everything was in water. He managed, the narrator managed to half swim and half crawl and reach his children's cabin because he had to see about their welfare. And he asked them, "Are you all right?" Then the girl answered, "Yes, we are all right, but my head is hurting a little bit." The girl Susan, she said that her head was hurting because there was a big bump above her eyes. She must have dashed her head against something and there was a big bump. But the narrator now had no time to actually take care of his daughter. It was more important to save the ship and save their lives. So after finding a hammer, screws and canvas, he struggled back to the deck and started to make some repairs. Then he saw that it was difficult to make repairs, and if he did not make any repairs, the ship would surely sink. So what he did was, initially he stretched canvas and waterproof covers over the hatches. Hatches are the openings, isn't it, to the deck. So that water does not seep inside the deck. He tried to cover everything up with canvas and waterproof covers through the holes, on the holes, but still some water continued to enter. But then the problem became worse when the hand pumps which they were using to pump out the water, the hand pumps got blocked. And when they got blocked, then he looked for the electric pump. That also was destroyed. It was short circuited because of the water. And in the meantime, the level of water in the ship started rising alarmingly to a dangerous level. So he went back to the deck and he managed to find 2 extra hand pumps which he had kept. He had kept those hand pumps along with the forestay sail, the jib, the dinghies and the main anchor. Forestay sail is a stand to keep the mast from falling, which keeps the mast in place. So he had an extra forestay, the jib, the dinghies. Dinghies, you must be knowing, dinghies are the rubber inflatable boats which are used in times of danger. The rubber inflatable boats are called the dinghies. And the main anchor. All these things were wrenched overboard. They were all in water. Then, so he couldn't get those 2 spare hand pumps also because they were all floating in water. Then suddenly the narrator remembered about another spare electric pump which he had in the chart room floor. So he connected it to a out pipe through which the water would be thrown out of the ship, and he was so thankful that it started working. So that whole night what they did was, in that bitterly cold night, whole night the 3 of them started pumping the water out of the ship. And they were also making desperate mayday calls. Mayday call is an emergency procedure word which is used as a distressed signal to get in touch with the emergency ground staff. Whenever a ship is in extreme danger, they use these distress signal to connect through radio to the emergency ground staff who are on the land so that they can rescue them from getting drowned in the seas. So they were making mayday calls, but they were not getting any response in return. The weather was so bad, so their distress calls were not reaching the emergency ground staff. Then once again he looked at his daughter's head and found that it had swollen up a lot, and there were her 2 eyes were also badly swollen up, and there was a deep cut in her arm. Then he asked his daughter, "Why didn't you tell me about your injuries at that time?" Then she said, in a very mature way, a small little girl, 7 years old, but she said, "I didn't want to worry you because you were trying to save us all." So she was so sensible and matured, she understood that she had not to worry her father about her injuries because it was more important for her father to save the ship and save their lives. Yes, so this was part 1 of We Are Not Afraid to Die If We Can All Be Together. As the chapter is divided into 3 units, I have dealt with the first unit in this video. The second and the third unit will be in the second video. So please watch out for the second video of We Are Not Afraid to Die If We Can All Be Together. Thanks for watching. This is VK Jayashree from Excel English with VKJ. Kindly like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.